Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Heather, and on this channel we like to walk a very fine line between a shopping addictive makeup monster and a responsible adult with a makeup hobby. Now, I really enjoy eyeshadow singles, duochromes, multichromes, blush, highlight, lip gloss, basically everything except for glitter. And today we're going to be ranking all the palettes that I tried out in the month of March. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stick with me. We're getting into it right now. And I'll throw a few caveats in here real quick. There are a few palettes that I'm going to hang on to go into April with. One is the Beauty Base Smoky palette, which I have filmed a video with, but it's kind of long and cumbersome, so I don't know if you guys actually want to see it or not. I tried doing 3 different looks with the palette, and I think it just gets a little bit chaotic. So if you're interested, definitely comment down below. Otherwise, I'm going to probably scrap that video because it just was... even editing it gives me a headache because it's so much footage. The second palette that I'm not going to rank just yet is the Denessa Lightworks Volume 5. Ugh, I keep dropping this little name thing on it. But this is just this really awesome palette here, and I don't want to kind of rank it and toss it until I know for sure how I feel about it because it is so expensive. So we'll hold off on that. And then the third one is the Delicious Delights, and I don't know why, but this one got like tucked behind some other palettes, and I think I only used it once this month, so I just didn't feel like that was enough to sort of give this a fair shot, and I just want to hang on to it and try it a little bit more before I give you that full ranking. So this one also is getting held over for next month, which means next month is going to be a lot of palettes. And I should go back and say the Nude Prism blush palette is one of the blush palettes I was trying out this month, which looks like this. And I did really like this one, especially for like these 2 shades or these 2 shades mixed together to kind of softly blend into the cheeks. I actually have these 2 shades on today, and I think that looks quite nice, but I've been reaching into this almost daily for the entire month, and it doesn't look like I've even touched it. There's so much product in here. And then the Frosting Highlighter palette was the palette that I had sort of assigned myself for the month. And this one I definitely dipped into several times. I do really like this, especially for inner corners. I have worn it as a face highlight as well, although not to work. But I do think that it looks nice as a face highlight too. So definitely happy with this one. If you have not already seen, this year I have a goal for myself to use or make use of all the palettes in my collection that I haven't used yet. So I'm working through them a month at a time. If you want to check out the playlist, there is a playlist available, but this ranking is going to be everything that I tried in March. Coming in at number 16 is the Ciate London palette. This is the Aspen color story, and it looks like this. Now, I tried this I think once or twice, and it really just has that like play makeup quality to it where the metallics are pretty generic. The only 2 standout shades in here are these 2. The rest of the metallics in here are pretty like soft and unimpressive. The mattes in here are fine, but again, you have like these 4 mattes that are virtually identical, so I feel like there's not enough of a gradient shift between these shades to really make it make sense. So it definitely fell low. I definitely didn't need this one, but I have it. All right, coming in at number 15 is the Rude Cosmetics Roaring 20s. This is the Neons palette, and this palette is decent. Like, I think the metallics in here have like bright, interesting kind of shifts to them, and they kind of have some like spongy, gooey quality to them, but there's a lot of like warm tones that I really didn't need to play with too much, and I feel like some of the shades seem a bit close to one another, where it's like, do you really need both of these shades? I don't know. Do you really need both these oranges? You know, that kind of thing. The color story itself, although it looks very nice in the actual palette, when I go to put it on my eyes, I feel kind of disjointed by the color story, so I tend not to go back to it very often. I think I only used it maybe twice this month, but that was enough for me to say, like, I think I know where I want to rank it, and it fell to the bottom for that reason. Next up, and these surprised me, but the next ones are a couple of Odin Eye palettes, and this is the Mighty Monster palette. When they did the sneak peek of these palettes, I was like, okay, I learned my lesson with the Christmas palettes. I'm gonna buy all the Odin Eye palettes because I really like them, and when I don't buy them, I get regretsies. I went ahead and bought all 3 of the palettes, and I do like the metallics that are in here, but these sort of like warm toned colors here, I don't care about at all. I don't really care for this like warm toned orangey shade, and I don't really care about the browns. So it's sort of these 4 and these 2 shades that I like out of the palette, and that's kind of like, I shouldn't have bought this, you know what I mean? And I think it's an interesting and dynamic color story, but it's just not a me color story, but I was kind of sucked in by the hype. So this one fell pretty low for that reason. And then Spring Dragon, I was really excited about Spring Dragon. I think the art on this one is super, super pretty, but the colors in here are so soft, like so softly pigmented that I just feel like they sort of blend away to nothing on my skin tone, which is surprising because I am so fair. And so for that reason, it's like it's already not terribly inclusive. And then the metallics in this one, I'm not sure if this is intentional, but I'm assuming that it is, are really, really soft metallics, like softly pigmented. They're like sparkly, but not like, they don't have big particle sizes, so they're just kind of like plain. And I'm assuming that that was intentional, just to sort of make it like this soft kind of wash of color on the lids. But for me, that's not how I normally do my eyeshadow, so it left me wanting more. Of the three of them, the Earthwood palette was the one that I was the most impressed by. In terms of the color story, I think this color story is all over the place, just like her last one, but I think this one and her last palette, this was, what's her name, Tina the Fancy Face, I think this one and her first palette that she did with Odin's Eye would blend together really nicely. I like that she does these sort of pops of bright shades in here, and then she has some like deeper moody shades in here. This sort of green to gold duochrome multichrome shade I think is very pretty, but it doesn't seem to fit very well with everything else in the palette. So like each shade individually I really like, and looking at them in the palette, I think they look nice, but trying to turn this into a cohesive eye look on my lids is really challenging for me. So the fact that all three of these, like I paid, what, like $110, $110, something like that for all three of these palettes, and they're falling like almost at the bottom of my ranking. Like that was pretty disappointing for Odin's Eye, because I don't normally feel that way about their palettes. Next up is the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural palette. And it looks like this. Now this has these sort of like mauve shades, which I really like. It's got these beautiful kind of army shades that I like. There's a whole bunch of coppery browns that I just don't care too much about though, so it fell a little bit lower for that reason. But the quality of this palette is really nice, so if this color story speaks to you, I don't think you would be disappointed by the actual quality of the product. Next is the Basic Witch palette, and I'm surprised this one came down as low as it did. But again, it's kind of one of those situations where I open it up and I'm like, okay, so I can do like pink and purple looks, and I can kind of do a green look, but only if I use two shades, and I can kind of do an orange look, but only if I use two shades. And so I sort of feel myself like being limited by this palette, whereas I didn't think I would feel that way when I first purchased it. So that was kind of a disappointing thing. I do really like the duochrome multichrome shades that are in here though. So overall quality, I like it, but I think it needs to be blended with other things in order to make it more dynamic and interesting. Then we have the Nightmare on Elm Street, what are you called? The Dreammaster palette. I'm not a horror movie person, you guys. This is the red toned palette, and I think it's pretty. I did this really cool smoky red eye with it, and I really liked how it came out, but I'm not usually like super into all red eye looks, so for me this falls a little bit lower for that reason. I think this shade right here with the sparkly red glitters in the actual matte is really, really pretty, and I think it translates well onto the lid if you use a glitter glue to sort of retain that sparkly quality rather than blending away to nothing. Overall, it's decent, but it's like if I go in here, I'm going to make one look. I'm going to make the same one look every time. So it fell a little bit lower for that reason. One palette that I was really surprised by was Itsbel's Under the Full Moon palette, and I really like this palette. I think this is a really pretty color story. I love that it's like swampy, grungy, but like cool toned, which is really cool. And I feel like this shade in particular has this almost neon blue quality to it that is really light catching on the eyes. I really, really like that. And then I like this sort of frosty, minty green silver shade. I think it has a similar like eye catching quality on the lids. I don't care too much about the golds, but you guys know I'm not a warm toned girl to begin with, so that's the only part that's sort of like useless for me, but everything else in here I really like. All right, then next up we have the Melt Halloween Town and Christmas Town palettes. So I put Christmas Town I think a little bit lower than the Halloween Town. I got these half price at Sephora. They did like a one-day sale for them, or I got the alert when the sale started, and I went in and picked these both up because I did really like them, but I did not want to pay $120 for these palettes. That was gonna be a bit much. But $30, absolutely. I like the greens that you have in here. I like the red to purple combination that's in here. The metallics in here are really kind of weak. I mean, they almost feel like they've hard panned, and I've used them just a few times, so I tend to not go into them for the metallics, but the mattes, absolutely, I really like. It's the same feelings I have with the Halloween Town palette. Again, I like the purples, I like the blues. I don't care too much about the gold and orange that are in here. This sort of teal, green, mint, sage kind of color is very pretty but very soft on the lids, and so I tend to use mattes out of the melt palettes and then go get metallics out of something else. All right, now we're getting into top 5, which I'm so excited about. I'm shocked this made it into the top 5. This is the Ghostface palette from Glamlite, and it's like all gray toned, right? And I'm super into gray tones recently, so there's that. But I think this shade is really pretty because it has this sort of like frosty aqua blue duochrome quality to it. And then I really like this shade that has this sort of coffee bean brown taupe silver mix into it. It definitely looks like it has different undertones to all the pigments that are mixed into this, which I really like. And on the lids, this one, and the black come together to make this really nice, like whiskey cool toned brown eye look, which I thought was beautiful. I used that a couple times for work when I needed to sort of tone down my makeup a little bit, and I could not be happier with the outcome. So definitely like that one. Coming in at number 4 is the Blend Bunny Sickly Sweet palette. And again, I think this is a really pretty color story. You guys know I prefer the sort of gradients rather than just sort of this jumbled pattern from Blend Bunny. But in general, I still think the color story is quite nice. I really like this metallic, and this one I dipped into regularly, as well as this one. I was kind of throwing that above my crease to sort of give like a glittery finish, and then popping it in the inner corners. I think you have a really nice collection of colors here, and I like that everything is like soft but not like blending away to nothing on the lids the way the Odin Eye palette was. The Spring Dragon, I feel like when you put those on your lids, it kind of blends to nothingness, and this you still retain some pigment after sort of popping it down and blending. Coming in at number 3 is the other Nightmare on Elm Street. This is the Freddy Krueger palette, and this is the green one. It's actually what I have on my lids today, and I think it's just a really pretty color story. I love these like swampy olivey greens and browns. Like if I'm gonna do browns, this is what I want, is like the olive green browns. That I think is definitely much more appealing to me. I will say this Vengeance shade here is really like hard pressed. In general, I think the ones from these Freddy Krueger palettes are a bit hard pressed, and so I don't feel like they're as buttery and smooth when I pick them up with my fingers the way that most Glamlite palettes are. So that was a bit different for me. And then I think the same could be said for the Haunted shade as well, because it kind of has that really hard pressing to it. It almost looks like I haven't even touched that shade because it's so hard pressed. It's like you barely get anything up. But the mattes in here I think are a great gradient. I really like how they blend. They definitely go nice and smoky and complement all the metallics. Coming in at number 2 is Fantasy Cosmetica. This is the Wizard palette, and this one, you guys, I really like this palette. Like, I held this back in February to play with it a little bit more in March, and I'm so glad that I did because I really enjoyed everything that I did with it. This Conjuration shade and Divination are so like richly pigmented and so buttery. I really enjoy mixing those together. This makes a great inner corner shade. I do like the hollow chrome, although it's a bit more challenging to sort of get that to pop on the lids. And then, like I said in my original video for this palette, I do think the two mattes that are light and the two mattes that are deep are awfully similar, so I kind of wish there was a little bit more gradient or variation between those shades in order to make this palette even more like well-rounded. And then coming in at number 1, which kind of surprised me, but coming in at number 1 is Siren from Sugar Drizzle. And I think what really gets me about this palette is the metallics, because they are so intense in here. They almost look neon on the eyes. I did a look with this and I used some of this purple, and I think I faded it into like a deep black from the Blend Bunny Sickly Sweet palette, like the dark gray, almost black shade, and the red then just looked almost like it was glowing off my eyelids, which I thought was so cool, and it really just helped me like appreciate the dimensionality of this palette. So For me, that was awesome. I used all 3 of the mattes in here, really liked all of them. I think the other metallics in here, Enticing and Sea Maiden, are really, really pretty blues. They have a lot, like this one especially, has such a dynamic shift to it, which I really appreciate. I like this purple shade because it is so like berry and intense, and it does reflect nicely. I've used it in my lower lash line on the inner third that I really liked. I think the only shades I haven't used in here were Siren Song and Alluring. But yeah, in general, really, really like this palette, and it came all the way up to number 1. All right, and with that said, that is everything for this video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you go. Leave me a comment down below telling me what are your favorite palettes from the month of March. I would really like to know, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!